What you see on screen right now are the guiding questions that we used to inform our exploration of this topic, inform our exploration of Star Wars. And you see them kind of broken up into two different categories. What's really at the heart of both of these questions are canonized elements of a story. And we wanted to look at how fan reimaginings impact our understanding of that story. So whether that be a YouTuber changing the elements of a scene, re-editing a scene, or potentially explaining the lore and looking into different pieces of that story, whether official or unofficial, how that impacts our understanding of the story as a whole, but also how these fan recreations, these fan-made elements of this story bring people from the outer circle and into the inner circle. What changes to the story allow that story to be more accessible to people, or in other cases, inaccessible to those same people? We were really interested in a fan's interaction with a story through their own production of media, through their own production of texts, and understanding the kind of dichotomy that it creates between a consumer and producer being really joined into one, and whether or not that impacts our understanding or makes it more accessible, and to what degree it does that. How can a fan consume and then change a text and interact with that meaning, and what value does that changed meaning, that changed text, that reimagined property bring to the table? I think that it's one of those things that we really just latched onto and wanted to make sure that we explored, especially when you take a property like Star Wars that has changed from its inception throughout the years, having new chapters of the story put on, yes, but also its changing of ownership into Disney, the elimination of now the extended universe as no longer being central to the actual canon of the story as Disney, as the owners of the property see it, but still being something that is not only near and dear to the hearts of lifelong fans, but also near and dear to their understanding of how the universe of Star Wars really acts, and what that universe is trying to say.
All right. So now we have experiencing the known and the new. So there are a lot of different subdivisions in the Star Wars community, but we are choosing to focus on casual fans versus hardcore fans. So to simplify it a bit, casual fans are more seen as the consumers of the media, like the films, literature, memes, fan videos, fan recreations, whereas hardcore fans tend to be producers of multimedia texts inspired by the community. And regardless of whether or not you're casual or hardcore, the purpose of the community is the same. It's to take things that fans have liked from the canon and just kind of reimagine them based on the content that is out there for them. They love this universe so much. They are invested in Star Wars, invested in the story, and they just don't have enough. They love it, but they're missing something. They want to get more. They want to share their product with the fandom because people in fandoms love talking to members of the community. But more importantly, when you say you're a Star Wars fan, some people are super into it, they get it, and others haven't even watched Star Wars. And since you love it so much, you kind of just feel like sharing it with them too, trying to bring outsiders into the insider status, trying to get them to understand what it's like to be in this community. So, going back to this, looking at literary works in regard to fan reimagining, the most prominent one is fan fiction. So we have different sites. We have Wattpad, Archive of Our Own, and fanfic.net. And it provides fans with the opportunity to rewrite, reimagine character scenes, plots, romances within whatever fandom, in this case, Star Wars. And they can post it on these sites. You get to vote, you get to comment, you get to interact with the people who are reading your product. You get to see how many people are enjoying it. You get to explore other people who have similar ideas. The most prominent that we have found regarding literary work is the inclusion of romantic elements and relationships that were never portrayed in the original canon, but perhaps subtly implied, that fans just really want to see. So we have some examples like Rey and Rilo. Kylo, an original character, is very, very popular. Just trying to squeeze someone who wasn't in there into the universe. Kylo times reader, it's written in almost like second person, so it's using like you are dragged into the hall or something like that. This is more of them wanting to insert themselves into the story and almost be immersed in it. Then you have other fandoms of same sex that has, been brought up more through the equality and the flourishing of that. And so you have Finn and Poe, Han and Luke, characters that have never been portrayed together, but fanfics wanted that. And this is just one example that we found on Wattpad fanfiction. It's called Stockholm on Starkiller. Fans go a really long way, This person made this cover, edited it together. Fate brings them together and the fire is ignited. So here we have an original character. She gets kidnapped, gets on the First Order ship, and meets Kylo Ren. So this one is one of the more cliches where it's, I've been kidnapped, but then I fall in love with Kylo Ren, and then I see him change, and I bring him into the light. A lot of these talk about Kylo redemptions. Also, a lot of these are rated mature. They have a lot of violence, a lot of sexual description, smut, a dash of angst. Qualities that weren't really included in the canon, besides violence.
So this is the sliding scale that we have constructed to illustrate our thoughts on how the Star Wars fan base can be classified. Essentially, we have on the left-hand side our outsiders or our casual fans, and on the right side our hardcore or insider fans. And of course, the outsider goes all the way down to someone who has never even heard of Star Wars, as slim as that number may be. And then on the insider, we go all the way up to someone who has actively worked on a Star Wars property, as there are many examples of Star Wars fans who have gone on to work for the newer projects that they have developed. So essentially, as fans become more aware of the intricacies of Star Wars lore, they also become exposed to fans who are trying to educate other fans about these intricacies. These could be through memes, or through videos, or through any of the media that we'll be talking about coming up here. This scaffolds the actions required to participate in the community for newer fans, allowing them to see how to interact with fans of different levels. So someone who attends Star Wars conventions or may produce memes or fan fiction could potentially teach something to someone who has just seen the Star Wars movies and thereby move them further down the sliding scale towards insider status. Now, the primary driving force behind all of the analysis and creation in the Star Wars fandom is authenticity, as it's been defined by both the fans and those who consider themselves not fans. Because fans have such a personal connection to these movies and characters, they will often not respond well if a character is shown to be acting outside of what they believe the character represents or is. For example, there are a bunch of fans who refuse to acknowledge The Last Jedi as a legitimate Star Wars movie because they do not agree with its depiction of Luke Skywalker and essentially have decided that they would rather not believe in the movies at all than believe that Luke Skywalker would act the way he did in that movie. On the other side of that, however, there are fans who support Luke's depiction in The Last Jedi who have taken to producing content to explain why they believe this portrayal is still authentic, which you can see at the link that we have here, video of the same name. This interaction of rejection and explanation is essential to the Star Wars fandom as it provides context for where fans stand in their opinions and their beliefs regarding the franchise. And you can kind of align yourself as a newer fan with a lot of these theorists and people who are in specific camps of belief about the different movies.
So the first part of analyzing functionally and critically is what are the parts and how do they work within and across text, people, spaces, media, etc. And we identified the parts as the Star Wars movies, TV shows, and outside medias. And we concluded that they work within and across the text, people, spaces, media, etc., as a sort of tier system, with tier 1 being the movies, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the new movies. Tier 2 is the movies and TV shows like The Mandalorian and the animated Star Wars the Clone Wars series. And tier 3 is the movies and outside medias. Outside medias being a wide range of things from memes to YouTube videos to the Star Wars Battlefront video games, and the list goes on. And the movies serve as the basis for everything, and the additional sources like the TV shows and the outside medias come in and add specifics and nuanced details and just more connection points to the movies, which is the basis for everything, and just adds more to connect the different text, people, spaces, media, etc. So you might have someone who functions in the video game aspect of it by playing Star Wars Battlefront, and then just by playing that game, that connects them to the movies because the game is based on the movie. And the same can be said throughout the other outside resources like the memes and TV shows, etc.
So taking that understanding of the tier system, when we critically analyze the figured Star Wars universe, we see two main things. The first being different levels of authenticity at the core of the fan base. And not only the different levels of authenticity that we as both outside and inside observers might put onto those tiers, saying tier 1 is inauthentic, whereas tier 3 is the true fan of the Star Wars universe, but also a discussion about what it means to be authentic. If you authentically love the movies and don't interact with the other pieces, does that mean you're not really a fan? Or can we break that up to being, I am a fan of the movies, the Star Wars universe as portrayed in the movies, or I am a fan of the Star Wars universe as portrayed in the books or in the video games, all of these different things. How do we as consumers view other consumers within this tier system, and who gets to decide what that tier system is? How do we get to decide where authenticity lies within that? I think you talk to a lot of different people who would say, unless you consume every single piece of the Star Wars universe, you can never be an authentic member of the fan base. You see that with other fan bases where you have the posers, the hipsters, the fake fans, bandwagon fans, and it's no difference here. And we see those different levels of authenticity. And frankly, as a personal observation, I think when you talk to people who share those views of that authenticity, the different levels of authenticity between the tier systems, you find people that are the more they consume, the more likely they are to view people who don't consume as much as them as inauthentic. And then that brings into question, or into the point, the very next one, the different tiers will interact differently with casual or hardcore fans. A tier 1 fan, as we've described it here, will look at someone, a casual fan, probably with a little bit more leniency, saying, okay, well, maybe you and I like the same thing, or even if you just liked The Mandalorian and you played some of the video games, I get it, we're on the same wavelength. Whereas a tier 3 person will really start to only interact with those hardcore fans, pushing the casual fans' observations, their opinions to the side, not necessarily wanting to pay attention to. We see a really intricate web of functionality and relationships within the different tier systems themselves. And it's not uncommon or unique. Rather, it's not unique to the Star Wars fan base itself.
Here we have our video, which the link is in the description, of us performing a stand-up comedy piece themed around Star Wars that we believe is an acceptable example of a student-created text within the Star Wars universe, or even just a fan-created text within the Star Wars universe, as it reflects a lot of the ideas of spreading authenticity while still being accessible and educating people on the nuances of the Star Wars universe while still being relatable in some way.
So to go back to our guiding question for this, how do fan reimaginings impact our understanding of canonized elements of a story? And furthermore, how do fan recreations draw in outsiders into the inner circle without having to be familiar with the intricacies in canon? And to, in a roundabout way, answer these questions, we said that fan reimaginings impact our understanding of canonized elements of the story by focusing on authenticity and thereby bringing outsiders into the inner circle through elaboration on key canon elements. And for the second part, how do fan recreations draw in outsiders into the inner circle? The fans bring them, referring to the outsiders, in with outside medias that's tangible, since our purpose is to share with the hope that they go through the motions, meaning consuming the tears until they reach maximum authenticity in order to reside within the inner circle of the community.
Here we see the Florida standards for reading and writing at the high school level. We've chosen 3 here at the 11th, 12th grade level that we think not only exemplify our exploration into the subject matter, but also the ways in which we explored our project, the stand-up comedy, the ways we approached that. And I would say that they're self-explanatory, but one of the ones that I think really sticks out to me the most is the first one: 2 or more themes or central ideas of the text, their development over the course of the text, how they interact and build on one another. We really see this with our guided questions in particular. The idea that canonized elements of a story change, they develop. When you look at something that is so over-encompassing, something that is very grand and drawn out and built in stages like Star Wars, you have to look at Star Wars itself as a singular text. And so how do those themes from A New Hope all the way to the Rise of Skywalker, how do those themes grow, develop, change? When you have something that is outside of that traditional kind of structure, the movie structure, something like The Mandalorian, how do those themes change? And how do those how does each director's choices within that develop the story, develop the action? How do we look at a different director's version or take on the Star Wars universe and see how it develops over time and relates the elements of the story to an audience? And just going even further with the analyzation of the interpretation of the story, and looking at how, again, kind of in the last one, there are those different interpretations of what Star Wars is, what Star Wars means, what Star Wars should say, and digging deep into the analysis, how each one of these interprets the story differently, not just within the trilogy. So how does A New Hope treat the ideas and themes that it presents differently than The Empire Strikes Back or Episode 6, which Return of the Jedi? How do the themes develop over that timeline, but also from, again, A New Hope to The Rise of Skywalker? Yeah.
And these are our references. We hope you enjoy.
Last Jedi.